Leaves.
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and that's what I was cleaning up because I had a whole bunch over here. Yeah, you see where
Oh my gosh.
where the growth are, it's got a little, all those
Oh, and
little
these are-
leaves and stuff.
This is all the medicine.
So, yes, I
Oh
have
my
some
goodness.
more medicine today.
That's
This is what I got
amazing.
last night. This is the fresh green buttons.
We're in Rio Grande City, Texas, at the home of
My name is Zulema Morales. Everyone knows me as Julie, though.
Julie Morales collects and sells peyote cacti to members of the Native American Church. About 2,000 peyote crowns called buttons have been cut, washed, and are drying on racks in her garden. Most buttons are about the size of a quarter and take about 3 to 5 years to get that big. The smaller ones are consumed whole.
The big ones are the ones that we use for the chips that we do over there.
So how long do you think for it would take to grow?
Oh, this one would have been like maybe a 30-year. Yeah.
And you just found that yesterday?
Yeah, this
Oh,
was
man.
my worker picked it yesterday.
Wow.
Usually those big ones have taken
Julie
30
is
years.
with reporter Robin Berghaus, and the larger buttons, she estimates, are 30 years old and about the size of a fist. And she runs the big ones through a tomato slicer and puts the pieces in a commercial dehydrator to make peyote chips.
Oh my
We do them into
goodness.
dried chips.
Oh,
This
wow.
is what they use for their teeth.
Oh, so then these, it's interesting. This is like, looks like dried fruit.
They'll do their own also, because they also teach their own younger generation, how to clean it, how to prepare it. But nowadays, everything wants to be advanced, so I have it already dried and prepared for them.
That's
And
great.
we sell it.
The Controlled Substances Act of 1970 classified peyote as a Schedule I drug and made it against the law in the United States. We covered that in the last episode of the Texas trip. But there is an exception. Julie sells peyote to members of the Native American Church, the only people in the United States who can legally buy it. To Native Americans whose ancestors have used peyote for centuries for healing and spiritual purposes, it's not considered a drug.
Yeah, it's very sacred for the natives, of course. They've had this part of their way of life, what they call their way of life, is part of their religion. I know that for them, it's something very spiritual for them, and it's very sacred in their lives, and that's how they've been brought up with the medicine, what they call the medicine.
Spirit medicine, some call it. Plant medicines have been deeply embedded in the spiritual practices of many cultures indigenous to North America for centuries. Peyote is a sacrament for members of the Native American Church, and Julie is one of 3 people in the United States who can legally sell it to them. She is a peyotera. With a license from the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, she keeps records of all sales and is audited by the DEA every 2 years. She lives along the southern border, the sole place in the United States where peyote grows wild.
It grows South Texas and, of course, to Mexico. But, of course, we can't go to Mexico for that. Yeah. We do it here in that's where what the relatives or the natives call the gardens.
And she's been picking peyote since childhood.
Originally, it all started with my father. His name was Mauro Morales. He passed away in 2022. All of this started many years ago, and we were young. We would help him out a lot, we'd clean it, wash it, and after he passed away, I took over the business.
Julie ships the medicine to Native American Church members who live all over the country. They also visit Julie's peyote gardens where they pray for their ancestors and the medicine, too.
And they throughout the years, they've come and make it a pilgrimage. But I know that many of their grandfathers and their mothers or their aunts and uncles have been coming by. And I know when I come, my dad used to come and see your dad, And we came maybe like 20 years ago. I was so small and I remember, and your dad gave me this, or your dad, or some stories about my father, And he let us stay in your house, and we stayed overnight, and we prayed all night with the medicine and listening, like right now, listening to the birds and everything out in the nature. And I remember that about me coming over to visit and come to the gardens, and that feeling of coming over. So I want my kids to feel the same thing of what I felt when I was young.
But there is a growing unease that this heritage will be ripped from Julie's family and members of the Native American Church as Western medicine uncovers and tries to commodify the vast potential of ancient plant medicines to heal the anguish of those with nowhere else to turn. But elsewhere, there's optimism about that very potential as lawmakers and regulators at the state and federal level start to make moves that might lead to treatments that people can access without leaving the country. Turns out, to take the road ahead, you have to remember the road behind you. We're about to explore both. Let's get started. From Texas Public Radio, this is Petrie Dish. I'm Bonnie Petrie. Welcome to our final episode of Psychedelics and the Texas Trip, Episode 3, The Road Ahead.
Support for Petrie Dish is made possible by UT Health San Antonio, committed to transforming the health of the community through a team that tackles problems from every angle, doing everything it takes to bring each patient the best possible outcomes. From teaching tomorrow's healthcare leaders to translating research into new treatments, UT Health San Antonio strives to make lives better. Learn more at everythingittakes.org.
It's spring, and Julie Morales' peyote cacti are beginning to bloom.
You see, and this is where their seeds are. They're blooming. They're beautiful. When they open up, they're all pink.
The cacti that produce these flowers have their own stoic beauty. They're round, like rough-hewn balls of faded turquoise, specked with white dots and woolly hairs. The part that grows above ground is called the crown. That's where the mescaline is concentrated. Mescaline is the psychoactive compound that produces hallucinogenic effects. Julie's family and a team of workers help her pick peyote. She wakes up around 5 a.m. and makes breakfast tacos for the team before they hit the road.
It's very important to get started early in the morning. When the sun is rising, you can see. Because the peyote blends into the dirt and the land. The color of it also blends into it. But when the sun is rising, you can see. You can see a little bit better.
Julie says peyote doesn't grow in open fields. It grows under brush, under trees, and taller cacti where it has some shade, some protection from that hot, direct Texas sun. Reporter Robin Berghaus is working with Petrie Dish on a Ferris UC Berkeley Psychedelic Journalism Fellowship, and she went to Rio Grande City to talk with Julie about her life as a peyotera and the importance of peyote in the spiritual practices of so many Native Americans across Texas and beyond. So, Robin, you got to go to the area they call the Gardens. Tell us what you saw.
Yeah, Bonnie, it was really fascinating. Julie and her family gave me a tour of Rio Grande City, and I sat in the back seat of their pickup truck with her grandson Hector, and her daughter-in-law Diana drove us along the back roads. And Julie pointed out acres of wildland where they searched for peyote when she was a kid and today. And she said, when she was a child, they used to pick closer to home.
Because we would come all this way with my dad, and he would say, aquí hay bastante peyote. There's a lot of medicine in this area right here. This is where the medicine grows. That's why they call it the Gardens. My dad would always tell us, if you can't find any medicine, go singing. Sing for it. And we would go down, venadito, venadito, ¿dónde está el peyotito? Which means, dear, dear, show me where the peyotito is.
Julie says it's been harder to collect peyote over the years. The Native American church fought to secure access to peyote for their healing and religious ceremonies when it was criminalized by the government. Their right was protected in 1994 when Congress amended the American Indian Religious Freedom Act. Now, it seems the major barrier to access is land development. And this means Julie must travel farther to find the medicine.
And before, there was no houses back here. We would drive, and it was all dirt road, and we'd go bumping, and by the time we got home, my mom would always say, "Ay, look at you. You've got your lashes and all your face full of dirt." All of this area used to not be developed. You see, now we've got all of these things here growing, electrical companies coming in, and windmills and solar companies and this.
In Texas, more than 93% of the land is privately owned. Julie always gets permission from the owners to access their land. Some let her freely pick the medicine, while others request a fee.
You can see right here, they've got an oil rig. You see? Right here. They had to clear that land in order to put that oil rig right there.
And when Julie learns about a construction project, she contacts owners to ask if she can get in there before the plows do to try to save the medicine. Because after the land is plowed, those plants are gone forever.
Oh yeah, throughout the years before, I remember we had abundance of peyote all the time. Maybe a day he would get 1,000, 2,000 buttons a day. Now we'll get 300, 500 buttons. Of course, it's not the same anymore.
Julie finds it hard to keep up with demand. With more than 400,000 members of the Native American Church, she often has more orders than she can fill. And from November through January, she really can't pick it all. That's deer hunting season, when owners prefer to rent their land for a premium to hunters. And beyond land development, poachers who steal peyote are exacerbating shortages.
Yes, I know that many of the poachers take it with a root, which that means that's not going to grow within the natural habitat. It's going to grow somewhere else, or they're going to take it and try to get their seeds and plant it somewhere else, those greenhouses.
Unlike poachers, Julie only takes the crown. And each month, she scatters seeds in places where she's harvested and then waits 3 to 5 years before returning to give the plants time to regrow. And this wild peyote, grown in the land, not inside a greenhouse, has spiritual significance for members of the Native American Church.
The land itself, it's where it's been prayed for throughout the years, and it's where it's grown. You take it somewhere else, it's not going to be the same thing. It's not going to have the spirit of the prayers of everyone throughout history.
Every year, Julie's family hosts peyote ceremonies on her property for members of the Native American Church. And she shows me a video that was filmed one night. 4 massive teepees are glowing orange with dark silhouettes of 30 people inside each one, praying and making music together.
I feel very blessed also because, like I tell you, we've grown with this, and I feel proud and happy that I am able to offer or have this for them when they come throughout the years, to be part of their way of life also.
The word always has a far deeper meaning than it would in a typical American conversation. Always, in this context, takes us back thousands of years. And across thousands of miles. That's the music of Sebastian Santiz. He's Mayan from Chiapas, Mexico. This song was sent to me by Dr. Yuria Solidwin, author and senior fellow at the Othering and Belonging Institute at UC Berkeley, a research and advocacy center focused on creating a more inclusive, just, and sustainable society. We spoke recently on Zoom. She introduced herself to me in her native language.
So lektalese bamayes yutsilal boni uhokolawal wukolawaligi untilbad huntepe untitalese. That's my indigenous Batikop language. In our language, we call it as such, even though in the Spanish it's usually known as Celtal. We're trying to reclaim the original names that we use it. And Batikop means the true word. The people that speak this language are the truth bearers. I was born and raised in Cuelha, in the highlands of Chiapas in Mexico. My human line of ancestors were all spiritual practitioners, spirit medicine, traditional practitioners.
Part of that sacred practice is the plant medicine that has now caught the attention of researchers and practitioners of what we call Western medicine and drug developers.
The extractive industries that have capitalized and commodified our spiritual practices using our rituals, our tangible and intangible heritage in order to appropriate them, to legitimize many times a business model that medicalizes these practices, that, we're going to use them developing pills or trying to register patents.
Since Salidwin is also a scholar in the Western tradition, she is speaking up about it. She co-wrote a study that was published in the Lancet Journal for the Americas that offered a guide for Western psychedelic researchers and practitioners who want to find ways to incorporate parts of indigenous cultural heritage into their practice of medicine. She says that begins by recognizing and respecting indigenous peoples as equal holders of what she calls sophisticated systems of contemplative insight. Salidwin acknowledges that our approaches to scientific understanding are different.
Science is a singular view and is mostly just the very colonial system of Western scientific method. It has its place, of course, of an understanding of phenomenons and then creating theories that then are tested that generate general laws. However, the place of indigenous sciences have the same rigorous observation and analysis of phenomena, but their understanding of it and how we use it for learning about the world is different.
She believes that because Western medicine developed in a culture that values rugged individualism, it doesn't really understand why these plant medicines have such an important role in the spiritual practices of indigenous peoples all over the world.
In the West, we have completely forgotten about the importance of community, the importance of a larger cultural system that embeds these practices, the everyday practice that empowers these ceremonial aspects. It is not only the resource that is used, it's rather the whole cultural milieu, the relationships that are empowered and created from that.
It's not that she thinks that Western medicine shouldn't seek to understand how these traditional practices heal people. It's that she thinks that they're missing what vulnerable people really need.
Veterans who are some of the people that unfortunately carry the most suffering from the horrors that they have lived and they have been imposed upon them. But that's also a part of the suffering of the entire world, right? It's a world that is devoid of the importance of community, that is imposed upon all these ideas of personal achievement, of material possession, of like dominance of one group over another, of criminalization of the vulnerable, right? And then how much this suffering this generates, that vicious cycle that one practice is not going to solve.
Psychedelic therapy may inspire a feeling of connection with a person who is experiencing it, but Salidwin says what we really need, all of us, is actual connection.
So we have to really return to a healing, generalized practice of community building.
Treating someone with psychedelics without the rest.
It's putting a Band-Aid into a wound, a systemic wound that we will not really cover with just the medicalization of these practices. We need to address a systemic problem that keeps thinking that ones have more value than another and that it is legit to oppress others. That belief thinking is what has brought us to this place. It needs to be dismantled.
Selidwin and her co-authors on the Lancet paper have established 8 ethical principles that should guide Western researchers and practitioners as they move into the world of traditional healing. They are reverence, respect, responsibility, relevance, regulation, reparation, restoration, and only after all the others are done, reconciliation.
We believe that there is a keen interest in finding ways to repair the horrors of history, even though we see the deep challenges that we are in, both at the social, political, and environmental level. I want to insist, never before have we seen such commitment and such awareness on our moral duty to do the right thing to benefit the larger community. So I think we never have been better empowered as we are now to address this.
She talks of approaching those who seek to appropriate indigenous medicine with what she calls fierce kindness and reverence.
I move toward reverence because that's the act of putting the well-being and the sacredness of all that exists before one's individual benefit, and show that deep kindness, deep appreciation, deep compassion, deep awe and devotion to all living beings.
As our conversation came to a close, I noticed that Dr. Selidwin had a poinsettia on a windowsill just over her shoulder. It bloomed a deep ruby red in a robust bed of green leaves, which is one of the reasons we associate it with Christmas. They're called poinsettias after the first U.S. ambassador to Mexico, named Joel Poinsett. But I knew the plant's history was much older. Poinsettias are no winter flower. They don't bloom with the first freeze just in time to brighten your mantle with holiday cheer. They're indigenous to Mexico, parts of Central America, and prefer tropical weather, actually.
They are the flower of the heart. We say, like the earth of the heart.
Indigenous peoples have used their sap for centuries to treat fevers. Poinsettias, like peyote, are medicine. When Petrie Dish continues, our Texas trip takes us back to Austin and possibilities.
Yeah, so possibilities-wise, universal healing. You know, I really feel like psychedelics have the power to initiate that.
And more from our chat with the former governor.
And let Texas lead the nation in healing a lot of trauma and also making a massive impact on the addiction problem that we got in this country.
Stay with us.
Support for TPR comes from the University of Texas at San Antonio's Brain Health Consortium, a pioneering research hub advancing neuroscience, neuroengineering, precision medicine, and more. Learn more at utsa.edu/BHC.
Hello, Gala!
Welcome back to Petrie Dish. I'm Bonnie Petrie, and here we are at South by Southwest.
Thank God he can read cool, and he writes great.
The first South by Southwest was a small, mostly music festival with only 700 people there. That is a fraction of the more than 300,000 that flood into Austin each year today, and they come from all over the world. The festival was always meant to be about more than music, and it has expanded to art, culture, film, technology, and now even psychedelics.
Today we're going to be talking about bringing mental health treatments like psychedelic-assisted therapy to the workplace and getting them covered through insurance, through employers.
Reporter Robin Berghaus went to South by for us this year to talk with all the folks at the psychedelics event.
Hi, how are you? With Texas Public Radio, just picking up my press pass.
So Robin, tell us all about it.
The psychedelics community was really excited to see something they care about get mainstream attention. They said it helped to break the conversation out of the echo chamber. And it attracted all types, from curious people to experts in the field. There were researchers, investors, advocates discussing topics from legalization and medicalization to how psychedelics could accelerate climate action. There was a panel talking about treading the line between religious freedom and the law of the land. There was even a talk on using artificial intelligence to create novel, altered states of consciousness. It was a little bit of everything. And as I walked down the hallway between sessions, a few people shared what excites them about the potential and their concerns.
Yeah, so possibilities-wise, universal healing. You know, I really feel like psychedelics have...
For me, it was mainly also about what psilocybin can do for patients with Alzheimer's. And I've also theorized what it could do for patients who suffered from a stroke, which my father did.
Well, there are a lot of directions it can go right now. I think that's kind of what's exciting, and also, like, it feels high stakes.
Just because we're mainstreaming psychedelics, does that actually net benefit society, or is it going to be another very expensive, very prescribed sort of experience that only a few people can have? Some people get to write prescriptions, other people go to jail, and it depends where on the socioeconomic spectrum you are, who that applies to.
South by captures part of the musical, cultural, and scientific zeitgeist for not just the United States, but the whole world. So when South by decides it's important to include psychedelic events in their festival, it means something. It's emblematic of the excitement around their potential. I caught up with science journalist Jane C. Hu before her psychedelic renaissance talk at South by.
Hi, I'm Jane C. Hu. I am a science journalist, and I write the psychedelics newsletter, The Microdose. The Microdose covers breaking news in the psychedelics world. We also do interviews with people that we think have an interesting perspective on psychedelics in some way.
Despite all the excitement around these medications, they have recently run into challenges on the road to approval. So Jane, can you tell us about that?
The first candidate, or the kind of front runner candidate for FDA approval for the last few years, has been MDMA.
MDMA, also called ecstasy, is largely known as a club drug. And in 1985, MDMA became illegal to prescribe or possess in the US. But therapists had used it for years to help patients discuss their traumas. Lykos Therapeutics, a psychedelic-assisted therapy company, has been trying to change that by taking MDMA therapy through clinical trials.
Lykos Therapeutics applied for FDA approval for MDMA to treat PTSD. And that approval last summer did not go through. And that was, sent shockwaves through the psychedelic world, where folks were wondering, well, how long is this going to be delayed?
So if MDMA can be an effective part of therapy, why did FDA reject Lykos's application in 2024? What were some of their concerns?
Generally speaking, in clinical trials, the gold standard is having what they call a double-blind study, where some participants get the real drug that's being tested, and then some participants get a placebo that doesn't actually do anything.
Even the researchers don't know which participants get the active drug or placebo. This is Science 101. If you're testing the efficacy of a drug, you need to have something to compare it to. That baseline comes from the control group, which is given the inactive drug called a placebo. But for psychedelics, this causes a problem.
With psychedelics, it's pretty apparent whether or not you've been given a psychedelic drug or not. And that has just been a repeated conversation.
Other questions and issues were raised by an FDA advisory panel, like whether MDMA could pose health risks, whether patients in an altered state of consciousness could be targets for predatory therapists, and also the fact that the FDA regulates drugs, not therapy.
And yet, MDMA is always, in their clinical trials, administered alongside therapy. So the question becomes, how standardized does this therapy need to be? And how do we evaluate the role that the therapy or the therapeutic intervention has in the drug's efficacy? And it seemed like the FDA was really in a quandary there, that there was no playbook to go by.
Now, if MDMA had been greenlit, it would have been the first FDA-approved treatment for PTSD in more than 20 years. Many people were counting on this new option because current antidepressants don't work for a lot of people. And at South by, we learned that there will be an independent party reviewing all the data. So it's possible the FDA could accept the results of Lykos' phase 3 trial and MDMA could be approved. We'll likely find out by the end of 2025. We've talked a lot about the potential health benefits on this series, but psychedelic therapies also come with risks. I asked Jane C. Hu what she has noticed over the years.
People have definitely been concerned about ketamine clinics in particular.
This was highlighted after actor Matthew Perry died in 2023 from a ketamine overdose. Ketamine is the only federally legal psychedelic drug. It is an anesthetic that can be prescribed off-label for anxiety and depression. And Matthew Perry was using it and apparently abusing it at home. And 5 people have been charged in connection with his death.
I've talked to clinicians who say that at-home ketamine can be appropriate for some patients, especially if it's kind of a follow-up dose after they have used the drug before under the supervision of a trained professional, and that professional is aware that they're using the drug at home and, that they have contact with that person and that they're still being supervised from afar. In a way, it creates access for a lot of people who could really use it, especially people who live in rural areas or people who have a disability or an illness that prevents them from traveling to that place. But it feels like a mixed bag.
All right. So, Robin, I'm really curious. What was the vibe around the appointment of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as the head of the Department of Health and Human Services? He has said in the past that he would support legalization.
I would legalize psychedelic drugs, some form of legalization. I'm not saying blanket legalization, but we need to make it easy for psychiatrists and therapists who are trained to be able to use this on their patients and experiment and see if we get good results.
There is excitement in the community, but there are a lot of people who are expressing uncertainty.
There are folks who are trying to play nice with this administration in hopes that there's a favorable outcome for psychedelics. And there are other folks who are very angry about the huge government cuts that will affect basic research. So in general, I would say psychedelics don't seem to be incredibly affected yet by the science cuts. A lot of the funding instead actually comes from private sources.
So what about federal and state laws?
Some states are not waiting for FDA approval. Voters in Oregon and Colorado have already passed ballot measures to make psilocybin accessible for adults through state license centers.
Oregon's program is agnostic as to the reason people are going to be seeking out these services, hence using this very staid term, psilocybin services, instead of, saying treatment or clinic. And they don't need any kind of medical approval or recommendation from, say a therapist. Anyone can go for any reason. And so that's been up and running now. I believe they're starting into their 3rd year. So they had a couple of years after that ballot initiative was passed to come up with the rules, which was, as you can imagine, a huge undertaking since they were the very first to do that. I think they've now served hundreds, if not thousands, of clients. And a lot of them come from out of state just because Oregon is the only place that this is currently accessible. But Colorado is not far behind.
Thank you for speaking with us, Jane.
And now let's have one more Texas trip. This one isn't too far, though, not from South by anyway. We're headed back to the Texas Legislature, which was back in session.
Texas lawmakers could take up legislation this year focused on expanding the study of psychedelic substances to treat mental health conditions. Republican State Representative Cody Harris filed a bill that could help fund clinical trials of Ibogaine.
State lawmakers are considering a $50 million bill that would fund a public-private partnership to study Ibogaine in clinical trials. Now, Ibogaine is a powerful psychoactive drug derived from the iboga shrub native to Central West Africa. In previous episodes, we explored how some veterans undergo Ibogaine therapy to treat their depression, PTSD, and traumatic brain injuries. Robin met with a man named Brian Hubbard in Austin to discuss the Texas Ibogaine Initiative. Hubbard is an attorney from Kentucky who believes Ibogaine could be the next breakthrough drug for treating addiction.
When Hubbard began his legal career in the 1990s, he litigated workers' compensation cases for the state's largest employers, including Walmart and Tyson Foods. And that's how he witnessed firsthand the beginning of the opioid crisis.
OxyContin was specifically, and I use the term detonated because that's exactly what happened.
In 2022, as Kentucky was set to receive $842 million in settlement funds from drug companies, distributors, and retailers, Hubbard was put in charge of the Kentucky Opioid Abatement Advisory Commission. It was Hubbard's job to figure out how that money could best serve his community. He attended town halls where people described how opioids turned their lives upside down. Many ended up in prison and struggled to overcome their addictions. Existing treatments failed them.
Eventually, my addiction led me down a dark path of heroin use, causing me to abandon my work, my education, and my relationships. My mom exhausted nearly all of her life savings sending me to traditional rehabs. I felt like a burden, and that the world would be better off without me.
So Hubbard started searching for what he calls Kentucky's Manhattan Project. And that's when he discovered Juliana Mulligan, a woman who overcame her heroin addiction.
She had been through multiple treatment attempts through medically assisted treatment with the use of methadone and Suboxone. And she said, the one thing that they didn't tell me about Suboxone was that the withdrawal from it makes my heroin withdrawal look like a cakewalk.
Mulligan also tried abstinence-oriented programs and 12-step programs. And when those didn't work, she found a clinic in Guatemala that offered Ibogaine therapy, and she made an appointment. But things went very wrong there. The medical team administered a near-lethal dose. She went into cardiac arrest 6 times and nearly died. Ibogaine is a very powerful drug. And Mulligan got very lucky.
But what she remembers the most was waking up in the intensive care unit of a Guatemalan hospital. And she said, when I opened my eyes, I felt the best that I could ever remember feeling in my entire life. She said, Ibogaine, it completely and totally resolved my opioid addiction. I have not had anything. At this time, it would have been 10 years.
Robin, as you know, I kind of hesitated to even tell this story because there is concern out there around plant medicines that people will try to get this stuff on their own and that they'll hear, well, Mulligan almost died, but she didn't. And her substance use disorder was cured like magic, totally worth the risk. I want to be clear that this is not the message we're trying to send here. Mulligan only survived because she got prompt, professional medical care, which is one of the reasons this process, the research and the testing and the approval processes are so important.
You're right. And that's why Hubbard focused on learning all that he could about Ibogaine, its potential risks and benefits. And then he made a proposal.
On May the 31st, 2023, we held a press conference on the state capitol grounds in Kentucky, and I announced the Kentucky Opioid Commission would explore the possibility of setting aside $42 million that would be matched by a drug developer to get Ibogaine all the way through the FDA's process and to be fully medicalized into the United States as a breakthrough therapeutic for opioid addiction.
But there was an election and an administration change, and Hubbard found himself out of a job. That's when he began looking for partners in other states that could pick up where Kentucky left off. And then he was introduced to former Texas Governor Rick Perry.
I asked what Texas's next project would be around plant medicine, and it's been my recommendation that they finish the job that we tried to start in Kentucky, and that's have Texas put up $50 million to be matched by a drug developer to get Ibogaine all the way through the FDA as a breakthrough therapeutic for opioid use disorder. And now here we sit together on mission with one another to do just that.
In our first episode, we spoke with Perry about how he supported HB 1802, the law that is funding a clinical trial to study psilocybin for veterans with PTSD. Now, Hubbard, Perry, and advocates like Marcus and Amber Capone, who founded Veterans Exploring Treatment Solutions, are collaborating with Texas lawmakers on the Texas Ibogaine Initiative to build a public-private partnership. The bill, HB 3717, was filed in March of 2025 and authored by State Representative Cody Harris. Their goal is to get FDA approval for Ibogaine, and Texas legislators are designing the bill so part of the drug profits would come back to the state of Texas to help build the medical and mental health treatment infrastructure. Governor Perry says that's particularly important for a drug like Ibogaine that has health risks.
Let's do it properly. Let's do it in the right settings.
Perry thinks Texas lawmakers will support it because their constituents will support it.
They want to help these veterans. They want to tell a young man who is at that point where they think they only have one option, and that's just to end it all, that there is a cure, there is hope. And so that's what this is really all about. And I think the members of the legislature get that, understand that, and that they're going to be willing to go forward with the Texas Ibogaine Initiative and let Texas lead the nation in healing a lot of trauma and also making a massive impact on the addiction problem that we got in this country.
The road ahead for plant medicines, spirit medicines, ancient therapeutics, psychedelics is still, well, it's still unclear. But there is a road ahead, and that's progress. For each person whose story of healing we've shared with you, there are hundreds who did not find help in time. For each doctor or researcher who is racing against a clock, ticking in their head, in their hearts, for deeply personal reasons, or each lawmaker who's making unlikely alliances because they are sure this medicine can save lives. And for those who are fighting with fierce kindness to protect their history and their legacy and their agency and their autonomy, as well as to keep the practice of this sacred healing grounded in shared respect, responsibility, and deep reverence. This, too, matters. Thank you so much for joining us on our Texas trip. This episode of Petrie Dish was produced by TBR News Director Dan Katz, Jacob Rosati, Robin Berghaus, and me. Robin and I wrote the show. Jacob Rosati composed all the music and created the sound design. an update on the Houston study we covered in our last episode at Baylor College of Medicine and the Menninger Clinic. At the time of this recording, some participants have started treatments and the clinic is still enrolling people. Go to our website, tpr.org/psychedelics to see if you or someone you know may qualify. Another PTSD study, this one in San Antonio, has just been granted nearly $5 million from the Department of Defense, researchers at the University of Texas Health Science Center at San Antonio, and their collaborators at Emory University will study the impact of MDMA therapy for active duty military members with PTSD. And that's it. That is the conclusion of our special Petrie dish series, Psychedelics and the Texas Trip. So thank you for riding along with us. And special thanks to Sebastian Santiz for letting us use his music in this episode, Halima Shah for fact-checking, Gabriel Cardenas, Sebastian Valdivieso, Michael Minazzi, Joey Palacios, and Gideon Rogers for producing video, photos, and graphics for our website and social media channels, and to Malia Wallen, Brian Davies, Corey McCluggan, Lauren McGaughy, Jake Perlman, Andrea Malloy, and KUT Studios in Austin for production support. Petrie Dish is a production of Texas Public Radio. This special series is supported by a Ferris UC Berkeley Psychedelic Journalism Fellowship. Now, in the United States, most psychedelics remain illegal to use and prescribe. Petrie Dish does not promote or endorse psychedelics, so please speak with a trained medical professional for your medical and health needs. Be well, friends. I'm Bonnie Petrie. Talk to you soon.